so because we believe in public safety and advancing public safety. We do it because we believe in advancing human dignity, and most of all, maybe not most of all, but we do it because we believe in holding the government accountable as well. So in that government accountability portion, we've decided to have this afternoon's event, Prosecutors Gone Wild. And what we really want to explore this afternoon is the power of prosecutors, how it can be abused, how can we address some of those abuses and really come up with a better system. And I'm so proud to have three friends and very knowledgeable people up on stage with us, all who have various experiences with prosecutorial function. The first on my right is Brett Tolman. Brett Tolman is a former United States attorney from the District of Utah, former congressional staffer for Senators Hatch and Arlen Specter. And Brett works on criminal justice reform matters right now with a number of organizations, including the U.S. Justice Action Act. To Brett's right is Kevin Ring. Kevin Ring is a former staffer for John Ashcroft when he worked as a senator on Capitol Hill, and he is the president of Families Against Mandatory Minimums, or FAM, one of the most active advocacy groups in the space. And at the very end is Arthur Reiser. Arthur Reiser is a former Department of Justice trial attorney. He is a former police officer. He is a veteran and former law professor, and he is the director of criminal justice and civil liberties programs at R Street Institute in Washington, D.C. So thank you all for being here. So let me just start with a broad question or a broad statement, and I'd like you guys to comment on it. They say the United States attorney is the most powerful person in government aside from the president. If that is true, why is it true, and where does the power come from? Oh.
Make sure everyone can hear me with this. It's interesting. That seems like quite a statement that the U.S. Attorney has that kind of power. I was an assistant U.S. Attorney, so I was just a regular prosecutor in the trenches. Did that for about a decade, and then I became the United States Attorney. President Bush appointed me to be the United States Attorney. And why I think there's some accuracy. Well, first let me tell you, during that time frame, while I was a federal prosecutor, you know that you have a lot of power when you believe that you can't lose. When you believe that when you go into court, you are the smartest person in the room. When you believe that you are going to win all of your motions. And it's only later, when you're a defense attorney, you realize you weren't really as good as you thought you were. And you're not as funny as you thought you were. You just wield enormous power. So everyone thinks you're brilliant and funny and a tremendous lawyer. But as U.S. Attorney, I literally had nobody that exercised any authority over me. None. And people say, well, what about the Department of Justice, the Attorney General? It's true that the Department of Justice is the agency that you work for, but your boss is the president. You're Senate confirmed, so you have the same authority as the Attorney General does, in essence, because you were confirmed by the United States Senate and nominated by the president. You serve at his pleasure, and that's the only one that can terminate you. And so with that, and you run your office, and you're out in your state or your district, and you have absolute authority. And while I was a prosecutor, I could make sure that my decisions and my thoughts were the end of the line. They were the thing that everyone had to listen to and follow. So on sentencing, I was more important than the judge, because the judge just had to follow rules, but I could dictate what the sentence was based on what I did. Charging decisions, I did that. That's all in my authority. And then the resolution of the case was all in my authority. So when David says you might be as powerful as the president, in that world, in that realm, there's no one more powerful. I'll turn this over if someone else wants to.
Well, I'll just say, and that's a problem. And how does it manifest itself? And why is that a problem? The prosecutors, as a group, are no more or less mechanics or anybody else. They're not bad people, we have a bad system that gives them that much power. And you know that because in the federal system, 98% of cases end now in a plea bargain. So we have a right to trial that's in the Constitution, and nobody exercises it anymore because it comes with such a huge cost. It's hard to win. It's hard to beat the government. You're up against the largest law firm in the world. They have the threat of long sentences to hang over your head, and so a lot of people cave. We know that innocent people plead guilty. But apart from that, it's just not the system that our founders set up. And so that's the thing. Usually we talk about the impact on families. My organization works a lot with the families that have been affected by our incarceration system. But what I try to tell people about prosecutors, because I don't want to seem like I'm bashing prosecutors, because I really don't, like I said, I think it's bad systems, not bad people. And our framers set up a system of checks and balances. And that was the whole point. The way you preserve liberty, late Justice Scalia said, what preserves freedom in this country is not the Bill of Rights. Other countries had a Bill of Rights. The old Soviet Union had a better Bill of Rights than ours, but there was nothing to enforce it. Our founders had the vision to enforce it through, a couple different checks. One is federalism, to disperse power among the different levels of government, and then to separate powers among the branches. And that was the way those branches have to check each other. What's happened now in the justice system is that the prosecutor has way too much leverage. So in the old days when you think about it, police investigate a crime, prosecutors bring charges, the judge sits, you have the jury, everybody weighs in. But with our sentencing laws and mandatory minimums in particular, as Brett said, he picks the sentence now. You cut the judge out of that process. So by not only do you decide who to investigate, who to prosecute, what charge to bring against them, how many counts to bring against them, but you're essentially picking their sentence. And so there's no accountability. And so it's not that, again, it's not that prosecutors are bad people, it's just we know what absolute power does. And it corrupts, and that's what's happening in our system now. And there is no right I can think of that is forfeited more often than our jury trial right. And we should ask ourselves why that is. And if that means anything, then why in 98% of cases people don't exercise their trial rights? Something's out of whack.
I think it would echo everything that was just said, but when I would stand up for a trial, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, jury, my name is Arthur Reiser, I represent the United States of America. That's powerful. That is a powerful sentence. And from that point forward, and you say that at Wadai when you're picking your jury, from that point forward, they look at you as the representative of the United States of America. You are in the United States of America courthouse. You have a judge with a black robe that almost always, probably not on purpose, but gives you deference when you're talking. At every step of the way, the system is baked into the system to give you more power. You have an FBI agent sitting next to you the entire trial. And what does our entire society say about FBI agents? They're badasses, they can do no wrong. Apparently they shoot 20 people a week, which is totally true. But that's what you get when you watch TV in America. So I would say that is a major piece of it. To add one little thing on to what Mr. Coleman said is you have to understand that I was a main justice prosecutor too. And people think that, oh, you're a main justice, which means I prosecute cases out of DC. I still at every step of the way had to go to the U.S. attorney and get them to go along with what I was doing or not doing. I mean, for God's sakes, the nickname of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan is called the Southern District of New York. Its nickname is the Sovereign District of New York. That's how powerful they are. And if you just type in Google Sovereign District of New York, it will come up as SDNY. So it is absolutely baked into the system. Everything that is wrapped around our criminal justice system revolves around the prosecutor. They have the power, they have the leverage, and they execute it with precision. And they're really smart people. It's the cream of the crop when it comes to intelligent lawyers, usually. And so it really is a system that just perpetuates itself. I say it's a self-leaking ice cream cone. It just exists, and it continues to exist, and it gains power the entire time.
Can one of you just put a little finer point on it for someone who's never been through the system? How is it that they exercise that leverage? If I'm sitting there and they say you're going to take a plea or else, how do they make that happen?
So, I'm glad for the question, because progressives, wanted to focus on, but we should be the ones that are actually wanting to rein in government power. So if I'm a prosecutor and someone doesn't want to take a plea, I know it's going to go badly for them because they actually risk a longer sentence if they go to trial, so they get punished for it. They risk a longer sentence if they testify in their own case. If they take the stand, you know what a prosecutor is going to do? He's going to apply obstruction of justice enhancement in the case because you went and took a stand in defense of your own case. But even if all of that isn't a big enough threat, to put a final point on it, here's what you do. You do what happened to Shalom Rubashkin. Shalom Rubashkin self-reveals, confesses to some immigration violations. 2 federal agents. He tells them, we violated some immigration rules. We have some people working for us they shouldn't. We ignored some of the signs. So they investigate that. They charge him. They go to the grand jury. They charge him. They want him to plead guilty. He says, no, I'm not going to plead guilty. I'm going to try to defend myself on this. I came to you and told you about it. They went back to the grand jury 7 times and added over 130 new counts. They then took him to trial. He still wouldn't plead guilty. He wanted to defend himself. They then took him to trial, and guess what? Never took him to trial on his original charges. They took him to trial because they said you lied to the bank. You told the bank your company was worth this much, and it really was only worth this much, and they gave you a loan that was based on that misrepresentation because we looked at your company and we don't think it's worth that much. And that's what he got convicted of, and that's how he got a 27-year sentence in federal prison. And guess what? There's no parole. You have to serve 85% of that sentence. And so that's the final point for me as a prosecutor. When I would engage in a negotiation and you look across the table and you see a defense attorney and a defendant that says, no, we're going to defend ourselves, you almost just kind of smile to yourself because you know you hold all the cards. You ever been in a poker game where you have the royal flush and you're looking at someone floundering trying to bet you off your hand? That's what it feels like.
Okay. So we know they have all this power. And what I've heard often is, trust us with it. We're going to wield it appropriately. What are the checks and balances in place to protect our liberties and to protect us from injustice?
Well, the discovery rules are supposed to really be one of the greater checks. I mean, we have the impeachment process. You can get rid of U.S. attorneys. The president can fire a U.S. attorney. But of course, what happens sometimes there's a political backlash to that as well. But I always thought the discovery rules were the #1 ways that I felt like I was in check. We have a bunch of rules. I won't bore you with all of them. People have heard of Brady, people have heard of Giglio. And on paper, they really work. The problem is, and more than anything else, is when prosecutors violate the discovery rules, almost nothing happens. There's almost never a professional responsibility investigation. When it does happen, we don't know what the results of the professional responsibility investigation say. There's almost no consequences. The Supreme Court has made Brady violations so hard to overcome that almost always they say, okay, fine, there was some problems there, but it's harmless. Probably would have still been convicted anyways. And this goes down to the states. I remember I was a law professor in West Virginia, and I was trying to do a paper on Giglio. Giglio is a rule that's a subset of Brady, and it basically says if you have a witness or you have impeachable material about one of your witnesses as the government, you need to turn that over to the other side. They need to know who your bad actors are. And I asked the elected DA, can I see your guys' Giglio list? And they said, oh, we don't have one of those. You don't have one of those. The Supreme Court says you have to have one of those. And I said, yeah, we don't have one, because if we had one, we would have to turn it over. And so we just decided not to make one. Are you crazy? That is the epitome of subverting the rule that was supposed to keep them in check. I mean, they're supposed to be kept in check. It really does come down to a violation of our constitutional rights. And if we can just go a little bit deeper, if I have a couple seconds, the fact that prosecutors are so baked into our system in the first place, it really is hard to keep them in check in any level. I mean, I've been trying to work on trying to change the level of immunity that prosecutors can have. I don't even want to get rid of immunity. I just want to take it from absolute to, you know, qualified. Just take it down one notch. And everywhere I go, people say that's a poison pill. You're never going to get that to happen. Prosecutors have their own lobbying forces in Washington, D.C. and in every single capital around the country, where they are one of the most powerful voices. And that makes a lot of sense because the vast majority of judges are prosecutors. It's over half that were nominated. It's not just a Republican thing. Obama's judges were all prosecutors too. Most of our, in Congress, they outweigh defense attorneys 2-to-1, but it's even more than that. I remember when we were working on First Step, and which is a fantastic bill, but when we were trying to, you know, gauge the support, I kept hearing, we gotta get some of the prosecutors in Congress to weigh in on this. That's a problem. When prosecutors have so much power over even the reform efforts, that's a problem. Which is why I'm always invited to panels, and why Brett's always invited to panels, because we're like the credible messengers for prosecutorial reform.
There's two of us.
Yeah, there's two of us. And then everybody else are people who've you know, served glorious time incarcerated. So that is a problem. That the voices are people who have been abused by the system and people who have who have been inside. So the checks and balances are few and far between, but more than anything else, they're not enforced. We have no way of knowing. There's no transparency at DOJ about how many times these cases have been violated. Look at in Alaska when they had rampant prosecutorial abuse. We still don't know actually what happened. I mean, people written books about it, but people I know on the inside say,
Are you talking about Senator Stevens?
yes.
Yeah.
People that I know on the inside have whispered in my ear, it was actually a lot worse than that.
Yeah.
And it was really bad. So if it was worse than that, I mean, holy cow.
To give you all a sense, Senator Stevens, senator from Alaska, he was indicted, he went to trial, there was some prosecutorial misconduct, there was some FBI misconduct. At the end of the day, did he run again and lose? Or no, he had to resign. And they replaced him with a Democrat, and that's how we got Obamacare by one vote. And Senator Stevens was ultimately vindicated because of all the misconduct, but he died in a plane crash before he could really see what the outcome. So let me ask you, if we're talking about checks and balances, why isn't the jury the right check and balance?
Well, I'll just say, one thing about juries that people should know is, and I didn't know this till I went to trial in my own case, which is the juries now aren't allowed to know anything about what somebody's facing. We have taken them where they used to be the community voice and decided who did we want to remove from the community. Now we've turned them into people who just apply narrow facts to the law as the instructions they get from the judge. But they're not allowed to know how much time somebody's facing. So many times now, you see a jury convict somebody, and then only later they found out that the person got 20 or 30 years. And they said, I never would have signed up for that. I would have convicted if I knew that was the sentence they were facing. But we keep them blind to that because the prosecutors say they'll object if you try to let the jury know how many times somebody's facing, then the prosecutor will object that it's not relevant. Because their job is only to find facts. And so that is considered a not relevant fact. So we blindfolded, and the problem too with that is the way that works operationally is jurors really look to the judge. The judge is the one who brings them in, has helped guide them through the selection process, gives them the instructions, sort of does their care and feeding for the day. And so they think the judge is going to have some say in this process. They don't know that the judge is cut out. And so they go along with this, and then they realize that there's no check. But if we had a stronger, and I used to not be from jury nullification, but I think there is no way to stop prosecutors from bringing ridiculous charges. So you've seen cases like in New Hampshire where they're bringing marijuana cases and jurors are just balking. And they're just finding people not guilty even though the facts are clear that the person's guilty. They're tired of prosecutors bringing these ridiculous charges. So I think a more active jury process is something we need.
I just want to add to that. People ask me all the time why, having been a prosecutor and for so many years, and I prosecuted the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart. I put him helped to put him in prison for 3 decades. I'm very proud of some of the work that I did. But why am I now speaking out and vocal about it? Because the system has so many malfunctions. I'm offended that we all stand by and watch it happen.
Yeah.
The grand jury process, for example, was instituted to be a check, a community check on prosecutors. And what did we do? We made rules for the grand jury that eliminated the ability for that to really be a check. When I started out as a prosecutor, I walked into the grand jury room and there were, you've got 30 some odd folks and they're gonna vote on your case. There's no defense attorney. I could use hearsay. I had no obligation to put any actual evidence in. I could just put the agent on the stand and let him talk about everything that he believed the case was. And then you think, okay, well, members of the community will ask questions. They'll ask good questions and they'll return a no indictment. In my entire time as an assistant U.S. attorney and as U.S. attorney, my time in the Department of Justice, I knew of one case where one count was rejected by a grand jury.
Wow.
In that entire time. Arthur's never had it happen. So think about that. Why is it? Because you're only hearing one side, and do you want to be the jury, the grand jury that doesn't bring charges against a real bad guy? So then you've got the charges in place. Now you're in front of the jury, and as Kevin says, the judge is just there to make sure both sides play fair. Isn't there to actually assist in whether or not this is a good case, a bad case, whether or not it's valid or not. There's no mechanisms to dismiss a case for defense attorneys that work. So then the jury is sitting there, and what do we as individuals believe about the criminal justice system? Our first instinct is there's got to be something there. If they brought charges, there has to be something there.
Yep.
Well, why I speak out about this is because I had a handful of cases in which I believed the individual had committed a crime, and I was wrong. I was dead wrong. I had cases where I was 100% certain, and then would later be proven wrong. And I thought, what about all the cases I don't know about, and what about this system? And if I had pursued those, even though I knew I was wrong, I think I would have still gotten a conviction.
Bingo.
So we've got a structural problem. We've got a legal problem. What about the culture? And I don't mean culture at large, but the culture in our prosecutorial court. May not be popular to say here, but I think most prosecutors are good and decent people with, upright motivations. But what are those incentives? What is the culture that's driving us away from Justice Jackson's statement, the prosecutor's job is to notch convictions, to do justice. And now we're actually at the point where a prosecutor's job is to notch convictions.
I'll just give one real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Arthur and Kevin. I was a young lawyer. It was one of my first jobs to be a federal prosecutor. It was a tremendous amount of power. And for the most part, I felt like I was, had a real good gut instinct and was smart, bright. But when I came in to the Department of Justice, the days of Attorney General Ed Meese, who would call prosecutors and tell them that to congratulate them when he heard about them declining a case, because he thought that was a real exercise, a proper exercise of their authority. To when I came in, where I received awards for the number of cases I did and for the length of sentences that I got in my cases. And I received badges of honor from FBI, ATS, Secret Service, DEA for the number of cases and the length of sentences that I got.
Yeah, my wall in my office is just littered with badges from different law enforcement agencies because they always give you, and it's kind of hard to turn away. It's a shiny badge, It's very hard to be distracted by shiny badges. I would say my number one issue that I believe is the negative driving of culture is there's a total lack of leadership that I would call leadership. The way that you get promoted for being a prosecutor is by doing trials. And the more trials you do, and the more time you get, time meaning sentence time, the more prestigious that you are, the better positions that you'll get, and the higher rank that you will receive in the prosecutorial court. The problem with that is that there's no emphasis on leadership. So often, especially at Main Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office I think are a little bit better because you have U.S. attorneys that get, they run their own fiefdom. So when it's bad, it's really bad, but mostly it's better. At DOJ, you have the bureaucratic machine that works as well. So you have these GS-15s and the SESs, which is senior leadership, who only thing they have done was been good trial attorneys. I mean, that would be if like the Marine Corps promoted people based on what their PT test was. Sure, it's a factor, and of course it should be a factor. But how ridiculous would that be if you became you want to be a general, be able to run really fast? That would be an insane system. We would have a bad military. The military looks at leadership skills. How do you lead? What is your judgment? Do you have restraint? Do you have compassion? And I would say that if you made a list of the things that you'd be looking for a prosecutor, I would think they would put integrity on that list. I think that prosecutors look for integrity when they hire the prosecutors. But I think they put compassion almost dead last. And I think that is a major problem. And I saw that myself. I mean, we're going to do a round here, we're going to talk about misconduct. And I actually could look back at myself and say, I probably should have done that. I was young, I thought I was a hot shot, never lost a jury trial, and I thought that I was awesome. And I think that is something that kind of drives the culture, is that you really have a lack of what I would say qualified leaders from the top bottom. I mean, look who the top is picked by political appointees. That works okay. I like the fact that there is a democratic check on that, but it doesn't mean that you're a good leader.
I would just say none of this is a surprise. I mean, they act like human beings act. If you're on a team and you're told to prosecute cases and you think you're putting bad guys away, of course you're going to do everything you can to win. I mean, this system is not, like I said, it's bad incentives and a bad system. It's not bad people. And I think all of us would probably be tempted to act the same way. We succumb to that power. And so I think they just act like people act. And the problem is the system is supposed to check them. And what was brought up before was, especially in the states, because most prosecutors are at the state level, these guys are political. If they go to the legislature and they say, give me more power, in order to secure victories, I need more tools at my disposal. And the thing that's so interesting to me is, when the teachers union goes to lobby, they may say, look, the best thing for educating kids is higher pay, tenure, all these things, and lawmakers say, well, I'm going to treat that with some skepticism because there's self-interest for you in saying those things. But when prosecutors come and say, give me more power, give me more authority, lawmakers tend to say, that's fine. Because one, they think they know the system best. Two, a lot of members of Congress and state legislatures are former prosecutors. Three, they know that prosecutor could primary them or run against them. So, and the judges, the other thing that's so infuriating is judges who have this thing, whose power is being taken away from them, they view their role as not being political. So they don't come testify. So you'll have a hearing about mandatory minimums, adding new mandatory minimums to the books, which are going to give judicial discretion to the prosecutors. The prosecutors all come and say, give us this power, and the judges don't show up because they say it's inappropriate for us to comment on legislation. But this is a separation of powers issue. This is not just normal policy making. I would just say the problem is that these people are acting like we all would act. They succumb to the temptation of power, and the system is supposed to check that, and that's the problem.
So, Kevin, you point out that it's not bad people, it's bad systems, right? But it also seems like there are cases where there are bad people who have ignored their ethical obligations, really, really bad cases of misconduct. Are there mechanisms to hold these people accountable when they do run afoul of their ethical and legal duties? And I ask that because on one hand, it seems like we've got a community or the nation as a whole that is gives the benefit of the doubt to the prosecutors, at least there's a large chunk. And then there's a large chunk that see all of these improprieties and over-sentencing and overcharging, and they lose faith in the criminal justice system. So we have that tension there. So what are the mechanisms to hold these individual errant prosecutors accountable? And is it working?
Well, I mean, you'll remember 2 years ago, FAM and American Conservative Union asked the Senate Judiciary Committee to hold hearings and to do oversight of the U.S. Attorney nominees, just like they do for judges. We said, this is the most powerful person. You hold hearings, you hold confirmation hearings for all the judges, and they don't do it for U.S. attorneys. We said, why don't you change that practice? At least have them come there before you and say, how are you going to exercise this incredible authority you're going to have? But Congress doesn't do it. And then in terms of, the checks, the truth is we give them a lot of latitude. And so it is hard, but even when they screw up, there's no, they never get called before congressional committees to be asked what's going on. This is a place where state bar associations should be saying, Mike Nifong, who was the one who famously went after the Duke rape, the guys who did rape the woman in the Duke lacrosse case, and he was like one of the only people anyone knows who got any discipline. He went, the state bar called him, his misconduct was so egregious that they disbarred him. But as we're saying, the Ted Stevens case, if you can do that to the longest serving senator, and you can cheat throughout his whole prosecution like that, and there's still been no accountability for those prosecutors, it's a very scary thing. I'm afraid we don't have the mechanisms in place.
Yeah, as far as the federal side, think about this. It's really the fox guarding the hen house, because DOJ comes in and says to states, to the state bar, you don't get to investigate our prosecutors. So if they do something wrong, we handle it. So you don't get to utilize the state bars on federal prosecutors. They use what's known as OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility. And Arthur referenced this. So they investigate their own. And by the way, they will not take referrals from defense attorneys about prosecutors. Okay? The only thing they'll do is if a judge issues an opinion where it criticizes a prosecutor, then they will open an investigation, an ethics investigation. That investigation is sealed, and so the public never gets to see what it is. So you don't have a state bar association that will do anything and has no teeth. The internal office has a secret process for it, and they won't take referrals from defense attorneys about misconduct on prosecutors. And you can't sue them, by the way,
Yes.
because they have immunity. Other than that, you can take a shot at it.
Are there statutory changes that could be made to clean up that process on the federal side?
Well, this may sound radical, but think about this concept. If they had some personal exposure, what kinds of decisions would they make? Would they be more careful? Would agents take a step back and rather than have a theory and then push the evidence to show their theory, do they take a more thoughtful approach? I've always advocated, I don't know what this means, how far do we go, but if they have personal exposure, and that is oversight, that is the ability to hold them accountable for misconduct. And by the way, the Ted Stevens prosecution, Arthur's absolutely right. I do know some of the issues and some of the misconduct. It is outrageous. That case should have been thrown out. It's a tragedy in terms of what occurred. And I've talked to DOJ lawyers that say, well, it's an aberration. It doesn't happen anywhere else. That was just really an aberration. Really? I know cases, I know things that occurred, and I wasn't even looking for it.
Yeah, the aberration was that it was a senator. Think about people who have really small voices. What happens to them? Think about people who don't have any money. What
Yeah.
happens to them?
Right?
So I would say there's three major things that I think that we could legislate. I'm not sure I want to get rid of all immunity. I think prosecutors need to have a certain amount of discretion not to feel that they're going to go bankrupt if they make a mistake, because people are going to make mistakes. But the idea that they have absolute immunity is insane to me. It's so un-American. So I think qualified immunity would work if qualified immunity meant what it actually was supposed to mean. That's a different panel. I think think that's the first thing. I think that two, the state bars should be involved. The state bars are the ones that are supposed to be investigating this conduct. The people who keep prosecutors in check are supposed to be defense attorneys. Because guess what we do against bad defense attorneys? We report them.
Report 'em.
I do it all the time when I was a prosecutor, for good reasons. I mean, they were doing, usually, almost always, when I felt like they were treating their client like crap. Like I had a guy fell asleep at a table once, and I reported him. Saying, this guy, he's going to go to jail for 20 years and you're sleeping? And then the third and one that I think is the easiest lift is I think that we should reform the rules of professional responsibility in all 50 states. If you look, I used to teach PR at Georgetown, and you look at the rules that now that Brett's subject to, it's like 5 pages. We see it as defense work now. If you look at the rules that prosecutors are subject to, it's like 1 page, 3/4 of a page. And it's like, don't be evil is basically what it says. But really, the rules should say things like, hey, if you go forward on a case that you don't think that is legitimate, then these are the possible consequences. If there's no rule for discovery violations, by the way, no rule for discovery violations in the rules of professional responsibility in all 50 states. And I think that is an easier lift because I think we can actually get a coalition between the right and left to do something. This is not a center-right issue. This is not a center-left issue. This is an up-down issue. This is a right and wrong issue. For every single problem that we've talked about, there have been problems in the Obama administration, there have been problems in the Clinton administration, and we are now seeing problems in the Trump administration. So this really is an issue of morality, in my opinion. And just walk away with this one thing. Everything that we talked about has typically been people that have been in some type of power. What about the very poor of us? You know, Gandhi said a society is going to be judged by how it treats its least fortunate people. And the fact that we build our reputations as prosecutors on how many cases we prosecute, the vast majority of those people are brown, black, and poor.
Yep.
And that is not a consider right issue. That is a right and wrong issue.
That's exactly right.
So I want to save a couple of minutes for questions, but I also don't want to be accused of a bait and switch, so I'd like to do a lightning round here. The question is, since I'm feeling like Alex Trebek, what is the most outrageous case of prosecutorial misconduct you've heard of?
I'll go first. This is a case I was involved in, not as the prosecutor, defense attorney. We get discovery. We're looking through the discovery. It is just gigabytes of, terabytes of material, and you can't get through it. It's impossible. You're buried. You're looking through it. We're looking through it. And all of a sudden, we start seeing our own emails, defense attorney emails, in the discovery that the government's sent to us on our client's different email address that we set up so the government wouldn't snoop on it.
Wow.
And so we're looking through it and I'm like, that's my email, We're looking through it. So of course we're like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah, we caught him red-handed. So we go in, we file motions, blah, blah, blah. Prosecutors come to the court and like, we didn't look at any of them. I mean, they're there, but we just handed over what we gathered. So we didn't look at them. The court's like, okay. Then we found evidence that they looked at them. So then we went back into court and we said, hey, they looked at them. They looked at all of them. They see our strategy. We were talking, see right here, we were like, this is what we'll ask this witness. This is what we'll ask this witness. With their strategy, we've now proven that they looked at them. Got into court, the judge says, you told me you didn't look at them. Prosecution said, yeah, I guess we did. I guess we did look at those. We're sorry. We're really sorry about that. The judge said, if this were a civil case, I would order sanctions. You would pay. But it's a criminal case. I'm really not sure what I can do. I'll make sure they can't use it, but other than that, I don't really have any remedies, so good luck. Boom. Conviction, prison.
I see this every week, so I don't know if there's one that stands out, but there's one that's heavy on everyone who works in our office of late, because it was a 38-year-old guy in Virginia who his cousin, who was very close to, was killed. He was a cop, and so he went into this death spiral. He went into this depression spiral, and he started using methamphetamine. And he moved into a meth house in Virginia, and was there for 1 month before it was raided. the government came in, they got the kingpin, got everybody else to plead, and this guy had no one to testify against. So they stuck him with the drug charges, and at one point, he had, for the kingpin, given a package to a confidential informant, and in the package was a gun. So he got gun charges stacked on top of it. So he got a 40-year sentence. And the judge said, I don't want to do this, and I shouldn't do this, but I have no recourse because it's a mandatory sentence. But the prosecutor, please find a way to make this go away. Because it was a 40-year sentence, the young man who had never committed a violent act in his life was sent to a maximum security U.S. penitentiary in Colorado, where he was immediately threatened to join racist gangs, and he wouldn't, so he was being watched. Prosecutors said to his family, okay, we'll bring him back, we'll say he cooperated, and we'll drop one of the charges. So we had to stop talking about the case because we didn't want to get him in trouble for being a snitch. So we stopped talking about the case. The prosecutor, for some reason, changed his mind and decided not to bring him back to resentence him. So he stayed in the U.S. penitentiary in Colorado. His family and we reached out to members of Congress to try to get him moved because he was writing letters about how he felt threatened for his life. The last email he sent to his sister said, I'm not a human being anymore, I'm inmate number, and his inmate number. And 2 months ago, he killed himself in the cell. That is the public information because the BOP will not even release the cause of death. 2 months later, they held up the body for 2 weeks and wouldn't let the family get the body back so they could deal with him properly. It's a system where you forget that human beings are involved. And some people hear the story and they say, well, you shouldn't have been dealing with them. You shouldn't have been doing something against the law. This guy was not sentenced to death, though. And the prosecutor had the sole authority to drop the charge to bring this guy to a different facility, and he did. I see that all the time, and it doesn't break the heart.
I'm going to give 3 micro examples that range from minor to pretty major. The first was when I was in AUSA, I was introduced to the grand jury my very first time I went to the indictment. It's never what Brett said, it's sealed, there's nobody else in there. And the way I was introduced was this. This is Arthur Reiser. He is a combat war veteran with a Bronze Star, Triple Hearts, and was a police officer. And went on and on and on. He walks on water. He is the greatest human being. He makes the best tuna fish sandwich. I'm joking, but when I left that room and when I came in to do indictments from that point forward, remember this is San Diego, so everybody in there was a retired Marine. There is nothing that I could have said that they did not drink. It was incredible, and it was absolutely unprofessional. I didn't realize at the time. I had no idea that was not appropriate. It wasn't until I was talking to the defense attorney later on, and they were like, what? That happens? I'm like, that happens all the time. We buy them donuts, and every grand jury is like fed every morning by the other the U.S. attorneys. The second was something that I did. I prosecuted a case. This person deserved to be prosecuted, but I absolutely sought vengeance for this particular individual because she quite frankly pissed me off. And I mean, when she was giving her proffer for she pled and she's giving her proffer, she was crying, and I think I said something effective, please stop crying because your tears only water my rage, or something like that. And it was mean, and I absolutely went to the mat on this case. She only ended up getting like 6 months or something like that, but it was absolutely personal. And if it's personal and she gets 6 months, what happens when it's personal and it's 20 years? And the last is something that's in the news right now. You guys have been hearing about the police officer in Florida who was planting meth on individuals, and they have been, you guys read this? What people don't know is that that case was reported by a prosecutor, a good prosecutor, who investigated it, saw that it was happening. She was like, why are 80% of all the cases coming from this one cop? Went and looked at the body camera, spent all of her own time investigating this case, brought it up to the criminal chief, and was chastised to the point of quitting because she was causing problems for the system. This person was putting people in jail, planting evidence, and instead of giving her a gold star and promotion, she was pushed out. And to me, that is the epitome of everything wrong.
Yes.
I'm going to add mine. And mine is Ross Albert, who was convicted of a series of non-violent offenses. You can read all about it online. When you read newspaper 26 years old at the time of his charge. Double life sentence plus 40 years for essentially inventing computer code. We've got about 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes if there are questions. I would ask you not to tell us about your own personal circumstances, but questions for the panel.